Exam Training Assistance Workshop. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. So, it's time for my October reading wrap-up. I'm going to try to be as concise as possible because guess what? My butt read 19 books last month. So, I know my goal was like 23, but look at that! I aimed high, and you know what? That is a personal best for me. So, we're going to try to be as concise as possible with this review, or with this wrap-up, rather, so that way I'm not, boring you guys to tears. So, first up was the Merciless Quartet, books 1 through 4. I read all 4 of them. These were basically like my 50-page a day reads. I really, really wanted to read this entire series. And I have to say, I love Daniel Vega. I liked more books than others. I think my 2 favorites are probably book 1 and Last Rites, which would be book 4. I think if I had to rank them, it would be 1, 4, 3, 2. 2 being my least favorite. Although you do see a common theme in all of the books, where the boys are the problem. The boys are just the cause for everything. Book 1, you are introduced to Sophia Flores and new town. She's haunted by her past from a past bullying experience that did result in the death of her bully, basically. And now you are in this new school, and she meets Brooke, and she also meets wow, I can't remember Grace. Rachel? Amber? I don't know why I can't remember the names, but they torture Brooke. They get Sophia to be their friend, and then what happens? Well, one of the girls, the main girl, she's like, oh, Brooke's evil. She has to be exorcised. So, they end up kidnapping Brooke and performing an exorcism turned torture session, which then ends up biting them in the butt because they all die pretty much except for Sophia Flores. But again, she's haunted by the whole experience, and that is the introduction to book 2. I felt like book 2, I will say this, for every single book, the pacing is relentless. You're just going. These are really quick reads, and I think they're great for the Halloween season. Maybe I think I was just too old for them now. I mean, I'm 34, and these are young adult. Not to say anything against young adult, but it does read more like early 2000s young adult versus modern day young adult, which is a lot more mature. Well, except for book 4. But book 1 was really, really good. And book 4 was really, really good. That ending, I'm still reeling, oh my god, so is she dead or is she not dead? What's going on? Is she gonna go get another girl and taunt them? And what's gonna happen next? So it's a really open-ended kind of conclusion where it's like Schrodinger's cat. Is she dead or isn't she dead? That plot twist in book 4 was not expecting that. But in book 2, I felt kind of like a throwaway. Her mom dies. Her grandma still has dementia, so she's sent to a Catholic school. And she meets a boy. Again, a boy's a problem. And the boy decides, you know what? I love you, but in order for us to be together, I have to exorcise that demon that's holding you down. So another exorcism turned torture session for that book 2. Book 3 was the origin story of how Brooke became possessed by the entity, whatever demon you want to call it. It's more like a vengeful spirit that just punishes boys. So, it's very complex, but really good quartet. Fast read. Definitely, there are books that are stronger than others. Like I said, 1, 4, 3, 2 would be my ranking of my favorites. After that, I read Deadly Ever After by Brittany Johnson. Thank you again to the publisher for sending me a copy of the book. It was okay. It was very predictable. And I feel like Amala gets way more characterization And then, let me see if I can pronounce her name. Cardcaptor. I feel like it was really more Amala's story, and Cardcaptor was just kind of there. She does get some character development, don't get me wrong, but I felt like most of the story was focused on Amala and finding her murder and helping her find her inner strength and her inner worth, you know, and saying fuck you to her father, who is a mentally and emotionally abusive man. I mean, he's awful. So, it is a sapphic fairy tale love story. You see that right from the beginning. Like, that's predictable from the get-go once you meet the two princesses. Oh, these two girls are going to end up together. Instantly predictable. I don't think it was meant to be unpredictable, but I think I would have liked a little bit more development in their relationship. Versus it's like, oh yeah, these are the two girls. You know, she is really going to be her true love's kiss. Like, okay. A little bit more subterfuge, I think, would have been appreciated, in my opinion. But I still enjoyed it. After that, I read The Dark Forest, which is the sequel to The Three-Body Problem. And for me, this book fell into the, what I like to call a trilogy trap. Where book 2 just felt like a whole lot of filler. I thought, you know, Three-Body Problem is amazing. I'm halfway through Death's End right now, and I'm already liking it more than this book. I think a part of the problem for me is I felt like I couldn't just, like, breathe when I was reading it. And that's not in a good way. You know, when a book just, you know, more like the chapter breakups were basically non-existent. So I'm someone who likes to read and be like, okay, where's a good stopping point for me? And I felt like there were no good stopping points for me to take a breath, absorb what I read, and then move on. It was very relentless. It was not as accessible as the first book. You know, Three-Body Problem is phenomenal at being accessible, even if you don't know science. This one's very much heavily science integrated, and while I love sci-fi, I still like it to be somewhat accessible to me. I like to be able to understand it and not be like, wait, what's going on? Without so much info dumping, you know? Because otherwise it just kind of bogs down the pacing. I think Three-Body Problem did a really good job of making it accessible, whereas this one, I struggled to connect to the characters. I understood the story. You know, you're dealing, you know, the Trisolarans are coming. You know they're coming. What is humanity doing? They're preparing. So you're having to deal with a lot of those ethical and moral dilemmas that they're faced with. Okay, what can we do to survive this, right? And that's basically a majority of the story, dealing with all of the ethical and moral dilemmas. And I understand why it's written that way. I just was not a fan of it because it felt just like a lot of info dumping. And I think there was a lack of characterization as well, so I really couldn't connect to the characters like I could in the Three-Body Problem. And like I can in Death's End. I mean, I felt like it didn't lack the humanity factor. I just think I was bored. I was just bored when I was reading it. And that's really unfortunate. It felt like a lot of filler. You know, it felt like filler. And it ended the exact way I thought it was. I'm like, you all, humanity thinks, oh yeah, we're totally prepared to beat the Trisolarans. I'm like, nah, you guys are idiots. Trisolarans are going to wreck you. And what happened? They wrecked them. Subterfuge. It was great. That ending was great. But for 75% of the book, I was bored. And I hate being bored. It was like a struggle to read it. I ended up having to audiobook it because I was struggling. And I'm like, no, I want to read it. I want to absorb this book. But I was just like physically reading it and I'm like, oh my god. I was just bored. After that, I read Hour of the Pumpkin Queen, which, love that book. It's great. First of all, I need a book 3, okay? I don't care who needs to know that I need a book 3, but I need a book 3. And you know why I need a book 3? Because we don't know who the prince is. Who is the prince? And why is he trying to destroy Halloween Town? Why did he go through this whole elaborate time traveling thing? I know words. to try to destroy Halloween Town. Like, why? Why did he trick Luna, who's a new ragdoll and Sally's sidekick, and she's adorable, and I love her so much. Why did he trick her into casting the spell that sent Sally and Luna back in time? Like, why? What does he have against Halloween Town? At first I thought, well, maybe it's Dr. Finkelstein. No, it's not. And I'm like, well, I have so many theories. And I watched Nightmare Before Christmas every Halloween. And as I'm watching the movie, I'm like, what if it's someone related to Oogie Boogie? Right? What if it's someone who wants to just destroy Halloween Town in his honor? I'm just like, who is it? And we never get that resolution. But it's still a really fun, fast-paced story. Again, we're following Sally on her. She's now Queen of Halloween Town. She's trying to bridge the gap between all the different worlds so that way, chaos does not ensue. Even though chaos does ensue. And she's taking on a lot of responsibilities because she doesn't really know how she fits in. She's just like, well, I'm not really from Halloween Town. I'm from Dreamtown. I don't really fit in Dreamtown because I grew up in Halloween Town. So she struggles with her identity, with kind of like finding her place and finding the direction she wants to take her future in. All she knows is that she wants Jack there. She just wants to be with Jack. And she comes to church. She, goes on the journey, and she kind of has to rectify with a lot of her own identity and even face Dr. Finkelstein. I love that moment where she has to face him off and be like, fuck you. That's great. Obviously, she doesn't say that. That's just me. But I think Sally is a really good character. And we are continuing the journey. We're going to different towns again. We're going to Time Town. We're going to Fable Town. They meet a dragon. They get to ride a dragon. The dragon is such a sweetheart. He wants to be a hero. He doesn't want to be a villain. He wants to be a hero. It's so cute. I need Shay Arnshaw, who wrote book 1, and I need Megan Shepherd, who wrote this one, to just come together and write book 3 together. I think they both did a phenomenal job in each of their books, and I think together, book 3 would be phenomenal. All I know is that I need book 3, so I'm manifesting here. Manifesting. I read Burning God by Kwon, Poppy War Trilogy book 3, and all I have to say is what the fuck. 5 stars, clearly, but what the fuck. That book was so well done. I'm still, fuck, man. That ending, I don't want to spoil it, but if you know, you know. And I'm just mad at that ending, but when you replay the entire book in your head, you're just like, well, it really couldn't end any other way. Like, that's the way it makes more sense. I think Kwon does a really good job of making her fantasy realistic. Everything that happened, when you think of just war and colonization, you're like, yeah, it kind of would happen that way, because humans are flawed. And you're like, everything makes sense. It's annoying that it makes sense, because you're just annoyed. You're just like, damn it, make better decisions. But again, in that moment, those decisions that the characters make sense to the plot and to who the characters are. Kwon does a really good job with characterization and making the characters really believable. Even if they are annoying at times, they are annoying because they are so believable. When they do stupid shit, it makes sense why that character is doing stupid shit, because it goes in line with their character, and it also is reflecting the trauma that the character has experienced up to this point. Because let's face it, every single one of these characters has experienced trauma. War. So I think it's just a really good story, and it was a really good conclusion, even though it makes me angry. I finished reading the book, and my boss, who loves this book, I was like, Christine, I finished. She's like, what do you think? I'm like, what the fuck? That's exactly what I said. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, no, not happy. It's a great book, but still not happy. Broke me a little bit. I followed that up with If Looks Could Kill, which was another arc sent to me by the publisher, so thank you again to the publisher. Yeah, really good. Really good book. It's really good if you like historical fiction and if you like true crime. I think one of the best points for me is it's Medusa versus Jack the Ripper. And Julie Berry has kind of rewritten the lore on Medusa in a way that I appreciate. So Medusa wasn't created as a punishment. Medusa was created as a weapon against men who would take advantage of women. And I'm like, yes. Yes, yes, yes. That's how the Medusas come alive, you know. They are created to undo the injustice of men. And one of them does go hunting Jack the Ripper. Unfortunately, because Jack the Ripper is a sociopath, her petrifying gaze, which is supposed to, like, it petrifies them by overflowing them with all the pain and anguish and remorse that any normal person would feel. Except Jack the Ripper has no feelings. So, it doesn't do what it's supposed to. So then what happens? He kills Medusa. However, this then turns him into a vessel. So every woman he comes into just like brushing against becomes a new Medusa on the hunt for him. So then people, you know, every woman he starts to encounter becomes another Medusa. Enter in Perl, who doesn't understand what's happening to her. And you can tell that Perl, as her story is explored, you can tell that there is a history of assault there. It's unclear what kind of assault, but there is one clear line where she talks about someone's named him, and you're like, ah, she was assaulted in some way. And now that is why she is a Salvation Army girl, because she is trying to seek God's forgiveness, even though being assaulted is no one's fault. Okay, let's just get that straight. But you know, time period. Let's be real. 1881. So she doesn't understand what's happening to her, so she has to kind of rectify that, and she is going alongside with Tabitha, I believe, is her name. Yep, Tabitha. So Tabitha is her kind of like sister in arms, but they don't really like each other. However, they do form a sisterhood as the story goes along, and they decide that each girl, the other one, is the sister they would choose in life. So they choose each other as sisters, and they become best friends by the end of it. And by the end of the story, Perl is still a Medusa, but her whole character journey is so well done. Honestly, so well done. So if you like a retelling of Medusa, true crime, historical fiction with a splash of fantasy, this is going to be the book for you. After that, I read Alchemised. This book was not on my TBR, but I did get with my Fairy Loot, and my friend Gina, her romantasy book club, decided they were going to read Alchemised. So what did I do? I read Alchemised. Kind of liked it, actually. I know there's a lot of baggage with this book because the origins do come from the author's Harry Potter fan fiction, which is a Hermione fan fiction called Manacled, which is, you know, what if Harry Potter had lost? And then, you know, Mudblood's turned into a whole Handmaid's Tale situation, right? So it is a complex story. I do think the author did a really good job of separating this work of literature from her previous one. It's more in line, like, if Handmaid's Tale got a fantasy retelling. You know, I feel like it has more of the Handmaid's Tale elements than it does Harry Potter elements. However, if you are someone who has read Harry Potter extensively, and if you have seen all the movies, you are still going to see a lot of those same allusions and elements. But that's not to take away from this story, because I do think the characterization was on point with this book. I liked the alchemy aspect of it, although I will say, sometimes the author got a very dense with her alchemy history. There were parts which was like, okay, you already talked about this type of alchemy earlier on in the book. I don't need such a detailed rehash. So it were times when it was a little repetitive and it was a little dense. I don't think the story lacked world building. I think there was a lot of good world building. Again, really good job of separating this piece of work from Harry Potter. So it is very different. Like I said, it's closer related to The Handmaid's Tale than it is Harry Potter. However, like I said, if you have read Harry Potter, you are definitely going to see some of those similarities, you can definitely say, like, oh, that character was totally inspired by blah, blah. That character is totally inspired by blah, blah. Outside of looks, just really, like, bits and pieces of their character. It is what it is. I mean, people get inspired by things all the time and draw inspiration. It's so easy. You know, Red Rising is basically a version of Hunger Games. I mean, there are so many other books out there that you could say the same thing with. So that's nothing against the author herself. I'm just, for all the people who are very much, you know, anti-J.K. Rowling right now because of her anti-trans stance, which, again, I don't agree with that stance at all. I have a lot of trans friends, and I fully support them all the time. So, but I do want people to also recognize that this piece of work is so separated from it. So I think you have to separate it from that, because there is no relation to that. You can draw parallels, but you can draw parallels with a lot of other things as well. Aragon, Star Wars. You can draw those parallels. So I do want to say that as much as you can draw those parallels, it still stands on its own, and it's still very, very separate. And that's what I appreciated, the effort that the author made to make this so separated, even though there were times where it was a little dense. The epilogue could have easily just been 3 more chapters. It was a long epilogue. Everyone's like, oh yeah, it was heartwarming. I'm like, I was bored because it took too long to get to the point. To get to that point at the end, I'm just like, no, I was like tapped out, emotionally tapped out. Like, it didn't have the same impact for me, because it could have easily been one more chapter, and then an epilogue to wrap everything up. It could have been way more concise, I think. It didn't need to be 1,000 pages long. I think it definitely could have been way more concise, and it still would have had that emotional impact. In fact, it probably would have been more emotional, in my opinion. After that, I read How to Sell a Haunted House. I hate dolls. That being said, I love this book. I hate dolls, though. I read this book for my virtual book club. Love this. I love how Grady Hendrix writes women. He writes women and moms with such respect and emotional vulnerability and realism that, as a mom myself, I'm like, oh, I totally relate to this. I think Grady Hendrix does a really good job of also balancing out campiness with horror elements. You know, it's not overtly campy. It's just expertly written, and it has just the right amount of campiness to it. I think the characterization is on point, and let me just say, when I finished reading this book, like, I was fine. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a really good book, but I hate dolls. I had nightmares that night about puppets and dolls, and I was like, oh fuck. I know I'm cursing a lot, I'm sorry. But yeah, it was really, really well done, in my opinion. I think Grady Hendrix is just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I read The Devils after that, and this is another book, just like with Alchemised. This is another one that would have benefited from being more concise. I will say the opening was a little rough. Going back and forth between the characters, you really don't get enough chance to connect to the characters. And then another issue I had was this book could have easily cut out 3 words per sentence, and it still would have been the same exact book. As it was the book club pick for the Fantasy Finance Book Club in Barnstable and Fort Lauderdale. And a lot of people had a lot of great points, many of which I agree with. It was very verbose. It did have a lot of superfluous information. It's just like, you can write this same sentence the same way, but you can literally cut out 3 words, and it would have been the same exact sentence. Even my friend who gave it 5 stars is like, no, it easily could have lost 200 pages. And he gave it 5 stars. It would have been the same book. Everyone agreed that the ship scene was just kind of like, ugh. However, the saving grace for me, even though it was very verbose, and even though it was a little dry at times, was that humor. That humor was top tier. And as you get to read the story, you are getting to know the character. Sunny is amazing. I love her so much. I love the whole misfit band here. And someone else made a great point. She's like, this is like a D&D campaign. And I was just like, yes, it's totally like a D&D campaign. It's so 100% like a D&D campaign. And I think that's why I loved it. D&D campaign, and every time they roll a nat 1. Sucks for them. Like when Balthazar summons the demon, and she's like, give me your soul and I'll grant your wish. And he, he's like, okay, can you do this? She's like, everything but that, sorry. No, you didn't pass the persuasion check, sorry. It's so good. And I'm like, yes. It does remind me a lot of, goodness gracious. Not Shadow and Bone. Why can't I remember her other one? Six of Crows? Ugh, and I love that series. But it's very funny. They are a misfit band. I do like their journey. I think it does offer a lot of world building. It's basically if the Shannara Chronicles was taking place in Renaissance Italy. And I love that element of it. It was entertaining, but it did drag sometimes. It was a little dry, and it was a little too long. And I say that as someone who loves reading, like, epic shit all the time. I don't know. But easily could have cut three words per sentence, and it would have been the same exact book, I think. And in fact, probably a little bit better. After that, I read the Hollow Places. So this was my month to read T. Kingfisher, because I love T. Kingfisher. Hollow Places was creepy. I'm never going to look at a willow tree the same. It is inspired by, I can't remember his name, Willows. It's a spooky, scary short story written by, just look it up, even H.P. Lovecraft said it terrified the crap out of them. So, I think Kingfisher is excellent at what they do. Creepy, atmospheric, unsettling, and humorous. I was telling my friend Jeff, I'm like, Jeff, you need to read this book. He's like, why? I'm like, because this is as if you and me discovered a spooky, haunted universe. It's our journey into a spooky, haunted universe, because those characters were basically him and me coded, for sure. And it's probably another reason why I loved it, because I just kept imagining us getting in this scenario. I'm like, yeah, we would do this. We would act like this. This would be our thought process. It's very creepy. It's very unsettling. I'm never going to look at a willow tree the same way. And the thing is, you don't even get to see what the thing is. Like the movie It Follows, you don't actually get to see the thing, but it's still like unsettling. That's what's happening in this novel. You don't see the thing. They can't even describe the thing. They're just like, it takes up the negative space between the trees, like, so you don't even see it. But you see what it does to people and who get stuck in this realm, and it's kind of terrifying. It's really terrifying, but never gonna look at a willow tree the same way. And I love willow trees; they're beautiful, but never gonna look at another one the same way ever again. Nope. Great book. After that, I read The Halloween Moon by Joseph Fink to my son. This is Joseph Fink's, Night Vale podcast. This is his kid's book, and I loved it. It was really, really fun. It was a fun, perfect Halloween read. I've been meaning to read this book for years. It's been on my TBR on my bookshelf for probably 3 years now. 2 or 3 years, I think. I think I bought it in 2023. So 2 to 3 years I've had this book. So well done. It's like the perfect Halloween. It's age appropriate, of course. It's definitely for kids, but it's about change, How change is good, how change is okay. You shouldn't be so scared of change. That's basically what this book is about. And I love that about this book. She has to fight the Halloween Queen, who has frozen time. She's like, it's going to be Halloween forever. And that's just like, okay, not too bad, but you did kidnap my sister, and I need my sister back. And your guy Dan Apple over there is going to keep throwing apples with razors at me, and I really don't want to die. I just want things to go back to normal. Esther, as the story begins, is afraid of change. She's afraid of starting high school the next year. She's afraid of things changing between her and her best friend, who also happens to be a boy. She's just kind of afraid of change, and that's totally understandable, especially when you're a kid. You're like, oh God, anytime I started a new school, I was terrified. Anytime I start a new job, terrified. Anytime I do, like, new things, I'm terrified of, like, change and, like, doing new things. But, like I tell my son, I'm like, you're not going to get anywhere if you let being scared stop you from living your life and trying new things. Like, you're just, it's just not going to make you happy in the long run. So, I always try to encourage my kids to, you know, do things. Like, my son was terrified of his character parade of dressing up as Pete the Cat. And he's like, everyone's going to laugh at me. And I just had, like, Carrie flashbacks. And I'm like, no one's going to laugh at you. I'm like, you can't let being scared stop you from having fun. I'm like, you want to be Pete the Cat? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, well, then be Pete the Cat. And when I saw him later in the day when I picked him up, he's like, Mom, you were right. No one laughed at me. He's like, they all thought I was cool. I'm like, yeah, exactly. You know, I'm like, can't be afraid of change. Can't be afraid of just living your life the way you want to. It's why I dress like a ridiculous person half the time, and do my makeup in ridiculous ways. Cause I'm like, you know what? Let me just do me. Like, who cares? But that's what the book is about. That's like the core of the story. You know, just being you and living your life, and facing all the new scary things head on, and not letting fear stop you. That's what it is. So it was a really good heartfelt story. Definitely recommend it if you're gonna get a book for your kids for the hot spooky season. After that, I read Sky on Fire. So this is the sequel to Aetherbound, which, God, that book came out years ago. Like, years ago. I can't even remember how long ago it came out. Was not ever expecting a sequel to that book. We got it. So now we're following a different character. It is in the same universe, and we do get to see Pent again. But I will say this. The author did a really good job of summarizing what happened in the first book. I remembered most of the things that happened in the first book because they kept saying, like, Pent died. I'm like, no, like, I don't remember her dying. I'm like, I remember her being okay. And then, you know, as a story, I'm like, ha! I knew it. My memory was not flawed. I remembered a lot of the book, but it was nice to have those little refreshers. The thing is that worked so well is they were sporadic throughout the story. They wasn't just like info dump. It wasn't just like one long info dump. It was a gradual build with the story, which I thought was really, really well done. I don't know if there's going to be book 3. The way this book ended, it was kind of like, okay, where do we go from here? Are we going to have a book 3? It had a very open-ended ending, so there's a potential. I like that we have a different point of view. I like that we are meeting different characters. I do like how we're seeing the revolution kind of come about again, and how we're seeing different aspects of Aether being used as well. So it was a really good sequel. Definitely worth the wait. After that, I read Shadows of Perl. Let me just check how I'm doing on time here. So I read Shadows of Perl. I think I like this book more than House of Marion, only because all the world building has been done, so now we're just like getting to the grit of things. I think for me, what also worked was the really good characterization. I think Jordan probably went through the most character growth in the story, and I also like how we're seeing different POVs as well. I mean, you've got Quell, you've got Nor, and you've got Jordan. Those are 3 POVs versus, I think, just the 2 in the first book, and the second POV was kind of just like there in that first book. It wasn't like a full-fledged, oh yeah, character with character development and growth. It was just a nice tie-in to that plot twist at the end. I think that plot twist with Red, did not see that coming. I didn't even see it coming from a mile away, and I love it when a plot twist catches me off guard. I'm like, damn, did not see that coming. I really enjoyed the book. That ending was jaw-dropping. So I cannot wait to read Fortress of Ambrose, which is book 3. Thank you again to the publisher for sending me a copy of that book. I'm excited. Let me tell you, I'm excited. After that, I read another T. Kingfisher, The Twisted Ones. This one was less atmospheric than the Hollow Places, but it was still creepy. Especially, as I said earlier, I hate dolls. Okay? Especially dolls that turn into something. I don't like dolls. I need to stop reading things with dolls. Thankfully, this one didn't give me nightmares like the other one did. Although the characters are definitely going to have nightmares for years to come. This one's more like, it's more changeling and fae related than anything else. It's like you know how if you get into a fairy ring and you get sucked in their world and you're kind of stuck there. So take that, but add a horror element, like a really bad horror element. It's like bad. It's like all the changelings and all the fae are dead. So the monsters that the changelings and fae created are trying to recreate the changelings, and it's like really twisted, but great. And of course, there is that humor element. I think Kingfisher again does such a phenomenal job with her characterization. And the creep factor was still there. Even though this one was less eerie, it was still very creepy. Again, dolls. Very creepy, and again, totally worth it. I'm like, T. Kingfisher's like an instant buy for me. Which is why I then followed this one up with Stalks the Deep. That was What Stalks the Deep. This is the 3rd book in the Sword and Soldier series. What Moves the Flesh was book 1. I like this one more than book 2. Not as much as book 1, because book 1 was, basically retelling of the fall of the House of Usher, which, come on, Poe. But I think this one was really well done. I liked it more than book 2. I think it's more memorable than book 2. Whereas book 2 kind of had too many similar elements to book 1. This one was very, very different. It gave me more of Annihilation vibes than it did anything else. They're going into a mine and they find things that basically I was imagining the creature from Annihilation, the movie, you know how it was just kind of like this shiny thing that took other identities. That's what I was imagining when I was reading this book. There is also the fact that Alex is a non-binary character. They acknowledge their femininity, they have no desire to actually just kind of be a man. They identify as a man. They will use he, him pronouns, but they do acknowledge that they were born a woman. So they like to call themselves, they, them, a lot of the time, as neither. And I think that's really good in how it was written. I think it's a really good characterization. Also, Alex's tone, like, their internal monologue is hilarious. Hilarious. Just half the time when they are just like, I wanted to say this, but what came out was this. And it's like, I'm gonna run for the hills. Okay, guys? Okay? And they're like, you're a soldier. I'm like, I know, I don't want to be a soldier right now. It's like, you're lucky you're my friend. That's basically the tone of the story. And it's a short novella. Super quick read. I read it in a couple hours, honestly, on Halloween day. So it was literally the last book I read. Oh, that's not true. The last book I read is Cardcaptor Sakura, Volume 1. The collector's edition. I grew up watching Cardcaptor Sakura. I'm like a doom and gloom girl, and everyone's really shocked that I love my magical girl so much. My recent coworker saw that she's like, Gina, is that your pink purse? Because Gina loves color pink. And she's like, no, that's Cynthia. She's like, that's your Cynthia? I'm like, yeah, Cardcaptor Sakura. She's like, but what? I'm like, it's an anime from the 90s. Cardcaptor Sakura. She's a magical girl. And I'm like, that's like the only kind of purse I can get for her, because I love Cardcaptor Sakura almost as much as I love Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon's always going to be my OTP. So, I loved Cardcaptor Sakura, so now I'm finally reading the manga. It's great. I love it. I just love it. It's fun. No regrets buying the collector's edition. So every month now, with the same thing I do with Sailor Moon, I'm going to read every issue at the end of every month. It's going to be like the last book I read every month. It's just fun. There's nothing else I can say. It's fun. And if you grew up with Cardcaptor Sakura and haven't read it, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go ahead and start picking up the manga. So, whew, I tried to make that quick. I tried. 19 books. So, go me. Will I read 19 more books next month? Probably not. But it is what it is. In any case, thank you all for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with all of your book loving friends. Let me know in the comments what you read, if you agree with some of my analysis, if you don't agree, why. Let's have a discussion. I love talking books, clearly. And in any case, once again, thank you all for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with all your book loving friends. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, happy reading.